Welcome to The Last American Vagabond. I have Shannon Joy here today to discuss the chaos of the world, the independent media upheaval, and all the different things going on in the world today. We haven't connected yet. This will be the first time we've connected online, and we're really both looking forward to having an engaging conversation because, I see her work in a part of this field that I greatly respect. She comes at these things in an objective way, nonpartisan, trying to find the truth. And I think, as crazy as that seems like it's such a basic thing, but you'd be surprised if you're new to this, how many people in this field, and we briefly talked off air about it, will, whether willful ignorance or just deliberate action will fall into that category for many different reasons. So maybe we'll touch on that overarching point. But we'll get to some current events today, talk about things going on. I imagine Los Angeles and riots, protests, Palunteer, health-related focuses, and we'll start probably whatever she sees as most important. But thank you for being here today. And Shannon, it's great to have you on the show. How are you?
Oh, it's so great to be on the show with you. I'm a great admirer of yours as well and your work. The group of independent media outlets, presenters, creators that you guys have put together is just so important. So I've been really looking forward to this interview. And yeah, it's like a fire hose in your face every single day because everyone's lying. I mean, that's the thing, and to your point, I would say the most radical position in the United States of America today is one that rejects both political parties, the left and the right. And it boggles my mind every time I see this play out with the Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution, the false flags, the created controversies, and how they just always move us. I mean, if you observe politics over a long enough period of time, for me, it's been 12 years since I started my show. It was a radio show for 10 years before I moved into video podcasting and platforming 2 years ago. But I have been observing and reporting on politics for 12 years from this perspective as an independent. And just to see it play out over and over and over. It doesn't matter what the crisis is. It doesn't matter what the controversy is. It doesn't matter who's elected. The infrastructure continues to be built, and it's an infrastructure of massive tyranny, unlike anything that we have seen in our lifetimes, or perhaps human history, given the technological advances that we've seen just in the past decade or two. So independent media is so critical. We have to support each other, protect each other, allow each other to disagree on certain issues, because a lot of us are coming from opposite. I mean, I was a conservative, Republican, born again. I'm still born again. But I mean, my entire life, grew up on Rush Limbaugh, never voted for a Democrat in my life, started my show, and then hit a brick wall. I was like, what the heck is this? Once I started paying attention, I realized the Republicans were just as bad as the Democrats, if not worse. So, finding each other and allowing each other to disagree on some of these legacy issues is so important. And I think also, to your point, also understanding that, sometimes it's not that the person is totally paid off or totally corrupt or a CIA agent or a change agent. Sometimes they just disagree with you and they're not privy to the experiences or the information that you've been privy to. Now, sometimes they are change agents and they are CIA or intelligence, and discerning that is always a struggle, but it's why I like to have conversations as much as possible with people.
Yes.
So, I mean, I put a lot out there, but yeah, congratulations on your commitment to being independent, coming to your own, conclusions on things, and really helping so many Americans and people across the world come to the truth in their own way. So I appreciate you a lot.
Well, thank you, and vice versa. I mean, it is interesting to think about, excuse me, that something like being nonpartisan, I think is the best, easiest way to frame it as being the most radical. And I agree with you. It's weird to see something like that, but it's not that it is the radical thing, but it's framed as being so outside, people are so immersed and so their identities have become so wrapped up with the idea of left and right that they see that as just like, it's just, like speaking Chinese, like an American, like something completely foreign, like it doesn't even make sense to them. And so so interesting, but I'm of the mind today that it is a rapidly growing understanding, if not borderline, if not over the majority line. I really do think that people starting to go like, yeah, this just doesn't make sense. And with people like you out there and others in this field that are just kind of hammering this home and asking the obvious questions, I'm of the mind that people are much smarter and much, are better and want good things in the world more than we are told. There's obviously bad people out there, but I think clearly the majority, and the point I would always make is the government wouldn't pretend to be fighting for liberty and freedom and democracy and, human rights if they didn't think we wanted that. I think the majority of us do. And so it's interesting that if you just put the real thing out there, I'm of the mind that most people who are just discerning, and some, they have their own faults and pitfalls, but they'll see something basic and go, yeah, what Shannon said is right. That's obvious, and it's so much momentum right now. So I'm glad we're connecting to talk about all these things because there's just so much going on, and it is, it's borderline cartoonish today. And that's why it's so hard. And it's not that it's just like objectively 4 years to 6 years, you go back a decade, it was not this wild, like the nuance versus the blatant lie. I think we're in the blatant lie territory, which is so interesting. So I'd like to start with, I got a bunch of things lined up that we could get into that are kind of current or things that are on my mind. But if I was just going to say right now, what's like the most pressing thing in your mind that you think is like if I said, what topic, what's the first thing that jumps to your mind? Let's talk about that. So
is the imminence of perhaps another lockdown scenario, in this case using the chaos, what I think is controlled chaos. I think it is a controlled demolition, the LA riots and the spillover riots in other cities, combined with some type of false flag bioterrorist event, and with the military involvement using that to precipitate and justify a full-scale lockdown 2.0 that I think would pale in comparison to the original. And that's what keeps me up at night. Will they be able to pull this off? That is the big question. Typically, if we can get word out enough among all of our media platforms and partnerships, and we can get out ahead of it, very often we're able to quell the plans.
Yeah.
And because they, if people are onto them, then they're not going to lock down in the same way that they did during COVID.
They'll swing back later, but they'll postpone, which is exactly, usually the best we can hope for at the moment.
Right, exactly. And so that's the thing. We're not stopping anything. We're not reversing and saying, okay, we are going to, we can't forget a democide was committed. That's the mass murder of civilians by their own governments. It was committed in 2020 and 21, and even in years beyond. And we can't even get this government or even our own people, RFK Jr. and Jay Bhattacharya, Marty Makary, to even acknowledge that it happened in the capacity that they hold as government bureaucrats. That's a huge problem. Mm-hmm. It's a huge problem. It is gaslighting on top of gaslighting. We didn't enjoy being gaslit by the Biden administration, Anthony Fauci, and Deborah Birx. And now we're experiencing this tragically with our own people. So that's been painful. The people who built this movement and proclaimed the truth and lost an enormous amount in order to tell the truth about what's happening. We're now in a moment of discord, which some people don't like. I think it's healthy. I'm not afraid of it. And, I'm just going to push through and do what I've always done, which is try to analyze each event in context of what has happened throughout history and outside of the two-party political paradigm. And sometimes I know what's going on. I can figure it out. Sometimes it's dark. I don't know what is happening. And, that's the difficulty of being an independent content creator and presenter in the 21st century.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think it's funny is actually the first things that I had lined up were health related. So we're on the same mindset here. But what's interesting that you note on, and I'm exactly one of my biggest fears in this that we've been talking about for a long time, is the intersection of these different agendas. And so first is the lockdown point, and how clearly I sense that you're insinuating like the immigration discussion and that kind of thing that could be used in the chaos to initiate a lockdown. But as you included there, like a biological element, which is something that I've really been discussing for a while about, where that will come together. And I think we agree that if those things were to come together in one event, it's just like the gold. It's exactly what's the best case scenario for what the government want to achieve. Right. So then you've got the immigration point, you've got the foreign invader point, you've got the biological point, and so it become this very clear. We're flirting right now with some kind of martial law lockdown dynamic, like at the moment that most Republicans don't even want to acknowledge, which is wild, seeing as how if it was Obama or Clinton or anybody with a D, they would have been screaming martial revolution before it even started. It's so frustrating to see. But before we get to that, because we can't, and it clearly, as we're discussing, they will intersect. Let's talk about the health side of this. So before we even get into the overlap of how it may apply to, that discussion we just had there, I did have some health points that I wanted to go over that I thought might be interesting that relate to, let's just say for sake of conversation, whether there will just be another COVID 2.0. I agree with you. I think that's highly unlikely because like we discussed, people are very attuned to that. And so it's unusual that it would just be that redundant, but it's happened before. So I wanted to go over a couple points that I thought were relevant on that regard. And here was about the vaccine schedule. RFK Jr. said a compliant child must take between 69 and 92 vaccines to stay in school in some states, and not one of them has been safety tested. He said that, which we agree on, and in a pre-licensing placebo-controlled trial. By the way, multiple shots they've already now approved also weren't done that way. So despite the claim of all placebo is already not true. But it says, so the people who are in charge of that are now gone. But my point was, and yet the vaccine schedule remains seemingly unchanged. Make sense of that for me. Like, I wanted your thoughts on that. I mean, I think we're aligned with this mindset, but if you want to comment on that, I think it's interesting. And here was the guy.
I said today on my show, I said with this guy, Bobby Kennedy Jr., it's one step forward, two steps back.
Mm-hmm.
And not even a step forward and three steps back. And this has been my criticism. The mRNA technologies are still on the market. They are still being recommended to children and pregnant women because of the clear as mud guidance now coming from the CDC after the fan dance kabuki theater that we enjoyed last week of removing it from the schedule. It is still technically on the schedule. There is a link that you can follow that makes no sense whatsoever. And this is why Wisconsin is completely ignoring the recommendations and continuing to recommend for pregnant women and children. And multiple states will probably fall in that category as well. It's because the leadership from RFK is wanting. Now, this, and I said the same thing, why? If you're going to get rid of 17 members of ACIP that are engaging in malpractice and recommending these terrible shots, you might have wanted to get rid of them before they went through the process of reapproving not only the childhood schedule, but also the mRNA.
Right.
So it is too little too late. Right. If you were even going to give him the benefit of the doubt on this and say, well, okay, that's terrible. I wonder about the timing because it just screams PR to me.
Yep.
It screams a systematic plan to roll these things out to keep people, on the hook, right? Watching the dangling carrot in front of them and waiting for something to happen, right? But even if you were to give him the benefit of the doubt, he says in this statement that it's malpractice to recommend childhood vaccines without the proper testing, which I agree with. As such, I would expect these recommendations and mandates to be fully terminated before the start of the 2025-26 school year and suspended until proper testing is achieved. And even if proper testing is achieved and you deem some of them or all of them to be safe, regardless of the testing outcomes, it is imperative that they move forward with recommending that all mandates for all children and all humans are prohibited by not only the US government, because the idea, we forget about the core component of the health freedom movement or the medical freedom movement, and that is informed consent and bodily autonomy. All of the discussions about the food and the air and the water and Fruit Loops and Maha and all of the things, right, distract us away from the very crucial center point, which is no government at any time for any reason, nor any corporation for any time for any reason ever be able to coerce or mandate or force a human being to accept a medical treatment, a medical intervention, or an injection into their body against their will, period.
You're here.
That discussion never happens.
Right. And despite RFK saying most of that before he was in this position to some degree. And then that's the part that I have the hardest time reconciling.
Right. Well, and who is going to replace, interestingly, that was part of a larger statement made by Bobby Kennedy Jr., which really irritated me. He said yesterday I retired 17 members. It's interesting that you brought this up because this was like the first in my show prep today, and I didn't get to it. Yeah, no, this is great. So I have this all written out for you. But he made the statement he retired 17 members of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and it's the governing body that wields the responsibility of adding new vaccines to the recommended schedule. And he said, over the coming days, listen to this part of the quote, I will use this platform to announce new members to populate ACIP. None of these individuals, he said, will be ideological anti-vaxxers, which really stuck out to me as a member of the informed consent community. I have been on the vaccine issue for almost my entire career, 11 or 12 years. And that immediately stuck out to me because the word anti-vaxxer is a slur that has been used against people like myself, also the medical freedom community that came out of the lockdowns of 2020 for decades. And so my question to him would be, what is an ideological anti-vaxxer, Bobby Kennedy? And why are you for blackmail or coercion? Given the amount of surveillance that the advancements in technology, the corrupt nature of Washington, D.C., both political parties, and just the proximity to power and also vice, what we have seen with the Epstein Network, Jeffrey Epstein, the relationship between him and multiple power players, both political parties. The work that Whitney Webb has done is extraordinary in her reporting of the Epstein Network, which was really a financial money laundering network more than anything, but was also engaged in the honeypot activities. When we see what has happened with Andrew Tate and the Tate brothers, the diplomatic protection that has been provided to them by President Trump, which blows your mind, right? These guys indicted, I want to say, almost 60 victims, 3 countries. The indictments range from child sex trafficking to rape to formation of a gang, money laundering, you name it. Anyone who doesn't believe that people in positions of power, diplomats, bureaucrats, judges, politicians, presidents, military, cannot be compromised, and that they wouldn't go to sophisticated lengths to compromise these type of people, I think is naive. I think that is a completely naive perspective, and it is held by probably most of our colleagues in the left and the right, but I think that needs to change. Whether that's happening with RFK, I don't know, but I would not rule it out. The other part of that is that you're never really privy to that. They don't open the books for us. So speculating on that is difficult. I will say, from my perspective, I look at the fruits. You will know them by their fruit. And so I really don't worry a whole lot about the why. I just look at the discernible policy outcome. What are the statements that they are making? Where are they moving in terms of policy? What are the words on the bill? What are the words on the proclamation or the executive order? And that's really how I try to judge everything. Because the backstory is, it's a lot of cloak and dagger. You just don't know. I will say that the first moment that I was very concerned about RFK was at the announcement in Boston in 2023. It was the fall of 2023. I traveled to Boston to report on his announcement of his presidency. And it was in that announcement prior to, I was there with hundreds of people from the old school, right? So the original gangsters of the medical freedom movement. These are people who have been on the front lines for decades. And there was a gathering at a restaurant of a few hundred. It was a large room, and the announcement was made. It was essentially, he's going to make his announcement tomorrow, and we don't want anyone to be disappointed. As he's going to move, forward in the next 12 months to gain the presidency, he's going to have to play the political game. So, you know, you might want to prepare yourselves. And so I don't think people were thinking he would never say the word vaccine ever again.
I've never heard this before. That's really interesting. Like priming everybody to, sorry, keep going. I just think that's
there was a priming. And then the next day in that auditorium, it was really, really interesting. Because remember, I mean, you're looking at Bobby Kennedy Jr. There's a body of work, decades long body of work of him laying down just bold, bold truths about the childhood schedule, about the flu shots, about politics in general, the military industrial complex, the medical industrial complex. And so to even imagine at that time that he would run for president and then become head of HHS and completely omit from his talking points, from his speeches, from his platforms, the word vaccine would have blown your mind, but he did. And in that speech, I will never forget, I was in the room and it was electric. You could tell it was full of medical freedom warriors. And he began to deliver the speech. It was about an hour and a half long. It was unscripted. And you could hear, like, he would talk about chronic childhood disease, and he would build up to a crescendo, and you could just feel people waiting for him to say the word vaccine and just explode in applause. And people were waiting for it. It never happened. It never happened. And
interesting.
That was my first, like, oh, there might have been a deal made there. And then when he made his concession speech and ended his bid for the presidency, and all of a sudden out of nowhere brought up the name Cali Means, is this guy who was, I mean, I guess the best medical freedom warrior out there. No one ever heard of him. In that concession speech, when he announced that he'd be joining with the Trump campaign, again, you saw an omission of COVID. You know what I mean? Of the word vaccine. So that was, you know, I reported this all to my audience at the time. You know, after Boston, I reported it. At the time of his alliance with Trump, I said, there's a big problem here. There is a big problem. Cali Means brokered this agreement. It is rumored that Cali and RFK Jr., I don't even think it's a rumor. I think this is actually on the record in reporting, met in a sweat tent in Austin, Texas, some kind of metaphysical health retreat where some of the participants get high. I don't think RFK does because he's sober, but I don't know. I think Cali Means admitted to being on some type of, I don't know, mushroom or something.
Yeah. Health related.
This is how these, I can't make it up. But, you know, somehow that meeting happens. They come together. Cali Means brokers the deal. This guy is a no name, but he has the cell phone of the president of the incoming president of the United States and RFK. And then the rumor is that RFK went to Mar-a-Lago, spent 3 days, I think, in Mar-a-Lago brokering this deal. And we don't really know the nature of the deal. But I said to my audience at the time, like, it's very clear to me. The deal is you can't say the word vaccine. Like, and you can't, you know, there are certain things that you're not going to be able to touch, especially in the campaign process. And then after you become, you know, head of HHS, you're going to have shackles. There are rules, and you will abide by those rules. And that is the only way that you're going to exist in HHS. And unfortunately, I think that it is becoming clear that those rules are going to prohibit him from any meaningful, in my opinion, meaningful movement. And so for me, I'm a rip the Band-Aid off fast kind of gal. I'm like, okay, guys, love him. He's great. He did a lot of great things, but we need to move on very quickly and become loyal opposition to this administration and sadly to RFK Jr. But it's not personal, it's business, right? And we are in the business. I'm in the business of liberty. I have 3 kids. They need liberty, and I just don't play. So
right. Well, and as usual, when you call something like that out, you know, clearly the facts are very obvious. You were correct, at least. I mean, like, let me come back to the point you made about outcome and policy. I'm so glad you brought that up. And that's the point, is the outcome we can see right now. He's not doing what was promised for whatever reason, but you calling that out in 2023, 2024, clearly that's at a point. I guess the point is, when you call out the truth, ahead of the two-party paradigm, everybody hates you, you know, and you've experienced this, right? And it's just, and it's so, and regardless of whether you flush out as being correct down the line, it's, you know, it's almost like you're that far ahead to the point to where nobody even recognizes that you were saying that when the time comes to pass. But it's valuable because you did reach people by doing that, and you helped people, which is, I argue, why we're really doing this, you know? So just hat tip to you for doing that and being ahead of the story. But the outcome point is so interesting because I'm really adamant about this. And it's one of these things, again, like I said about the two-party illusion to start, it seems like this would be just basic common knowledge, but the idea that we shouldn't be engaging with what they say they're going to do, what they say, you know, what they promise, whatever the different things are, the narrative. We should be focusing only on what they've done so far, the precedent, and then what is happening. What is the outcome? And that's not to say that we know that they chose not to. Maybe they got stopped. Maybe the other side stopped them. But at the end of the day, it's just the government and the outcome. And if we actually only engage with those things, they can't really fool us the way they're doing right now. But it's just, people just don't want to get invested. It's the identity politics of the left and the right, the woke of the left and the right that seems to drive everything. So I'm just really glad you made that point, because I think it behooves us all to really stress that. Just focus on what is the outcome. What are they doing, not what they're saying.
I think it's difficult in an era of very sophisticated fear propaganda.
Yeah.
And very sophisticated psyops, because so much of this is dependent on very real and very profound fear that has an impact on the human psyche. And so when you're in a foxhole with someone and you are very fearful and you are taught to fear the other party or the other religious group or the other race or the other culture, whatever that conditioning is, then it leads you to imprint on people who are then presented to you as a hero. And that imprint, I think, is psychologically and even spiritually very hard to break.
Yeah.
Because people then, and I can't tell you how many times I hear, well, I trust so-and-so.
Right.
I trust this particular party. I'm like, no, you have failed politics 101. You never, ever lead with the words, I trust.
Right.
Don't do it. Right. Like that is an indication that you have been propagandized.
Absolutely.
And that you are being manipulated by your own fear.
And I would say really quickly, even if they can be trusted, like the fact that you're choosing to try, like they could be played, they could be lied to, and you're still playing. You know, I love that you said that. It's so important.
Absolutely. And you don't know how many layers are there.
Right.
And we don't have all areas of information and all aspects, right? We all have our own experiences and the stories that we focus on. And so, navigating this is difficult. But I would say, yeah, the focusing on only the outcome has been absolutely critical for me in my career. And it's been almost like a safety net for me. Like it keeps me on the straight and narrow, keeps me from falling out into different factions or different, because there's a lot of fear out there. And it also helps me to not be so afraid. And it's scary times. It's hard to not be afraid, but you got to battle that every day.
Well, and I agree. And it's not hyperbolic to say that. I mean, there's a lot of very, very intense, whether it's just warfare or dramatic changes in what we always thought were like foundational ideas, like there's a lot of upheaval right now. And it's very, I think it's important that the people of your seat like it's a reality TV show, and it's very, very prominent. And we'll get to that in a second. But you brought up Epstein. So I wanted to touch on this, which I thought was interesting, so we can kind of come at two different things. We're talking about the two-party paradigm, and the false binary as I see it. And this Epstein overlap point is pretty interesting. So let's talk about both, right? So Elon Musk, everybody saw, whether it was theater, and feel free to comment on that because I'm very skeptical about whatever just happened with all that. But they had this little tiff, and it was very strange. But I'm of the mind that a lot of them in that inner circle really don't like each other, but that's not what it's about, right? There's a larger non-binary kind of agenda in this government. But he did say that Trump was on the Epstein list, which I think, frankly, is probably the case with all the evidence we have, but I can't say I know for sure. But with what's going on with the administration and like Cash and Bongino, even their own team seems to hate them right now. They're all ridiculous. And, it's just so clear that there's manipulation.
Videos.
Yeah. Do you want to comment on that real quick before I go further? Feel free, because it's interesting.
No, go ahead. You can, like, you finish and then I'll tell you.
Okay, it's hilarious though. I just think that whole thing with the two of them is just, it's comical. It's hard to watch. It's ridiculous.
Right.
But so Elon says, I regret some of my posts about President Trump last week. They went too far, is what he says. So they're trying to patch it up, it seems. And I think it's clearly being like drawn together because of like the LA situation. Now they're like, high five, we're on the same team again. That's what I'm sensing. And Candace says, what specifically do you regret? Do you regret telling the lie that Trump is in the Epstein files, or do you regret telling the truth that is in the Epstein files? So, wherever you want to take that, the Epstein point I think is interesting, but I just think all of that is he's interesting. Go ahead.
I mean, oh gosh, like this thread with Trump and Epstein, Trump and the Tates, Trump and his proximity to predators and sexual abusers, Trump and his statements, Trump and his multiple wives, Trump and his creepiness, Trump, groping young, Miss America pageant contenders. I mean, Trump grabbing the you-know-what in his discussion with Billy Bush, Trump making disgusting comments about Megyn Kelly. Like, he has been a degenerate since day one. He has always been demeaning and likely, in my opinion, abusive of women. There are multiple cases that he's been, or multiple accusations of various sorts of sexual advances or even abusive behavior from women over years.
One thing really quickly is to say these things is objective reality. Like, you can still argue that he is saving the country, or that you think he's a good guy, or maybe he's changed, or half of those things are misrepresented. The point, though, is to clearly point out that there is a track record. You can read his books, but yet people will call that Trump derangement syndrome because the partisan side ignores things that are uncomfortable to what they want to achieve. So I just think, I just want to point that out, because this is a nonpartisan conversation, and I argue both of us would make just as many statements about how ridiculous Biden is. But it's funny how much they circle the wagons around the person they like. Please continue.
Well, yeah, they snuffed that out. They essentially erased, in the course of the first 4 years of the Trump presidency, they were able to, through propaganda, erase his history.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will say, you want to go back like almost 10 years, when he came down the escalator, I was just on the radio at that time, and I did a deep dive into Donald Trump and found all of this, right? I mean, it's not a question. And most concerning to me, which I brought to my audience, I'll never forget it. And this is actually what got me originally blackballed. I was still kind of a conservative. Then I was on conservative radio, and it was my initial, I rejected Donald Trump from the very first day. Well, from my very first round of research, and really never changed my tune throughout the past decade. And it was the naming of Donald Trump on the Lolita Express. It was Jeffrey Epstein's private jet. And I said, guys, and then there were also many reports. I mean, Donald Trump was not just an associate with Jeffrey Epstein. Donald Trump, according to Jeffrey Epstein, in about hours and hours, maybe dozens of hours of audio recording that were done recently by an independent reporter. I forget what his name is, but he was able to get Jeffrey Epstein prior to him suiciding himself in federal prison. They were not associates. They were like best friends. They went out on dates with each other. Epstein knew very intimate details of Donald Trump's life. It was a well-established fact that these guys were out on the town. They were with very, very young women. And this was just an established fact. And I said to my audience at the time, this is a problem. I mean, we just got off years of Sean Hannity raging about Lolita Express and Hillary Clinton and all of Jeffrey, and they used that, they wielded that as a political weapon to go after Hillary Clinton and the Clinton administration. But then, the moment Trump came onto the scene, they did not want to talk about the fact that not only was Bill Clinton on the list, on the log, but Donald Trump was also on the log as well, multiple times. I'm like, this is, they can drag this up. They can bring this up again. And it was just so interesting that Elon brought it up. And I wouldn't be surprised at all. I would not be, nothing would surprise me. These people in these positions of power are in my opinion, in order to even get there, you have to be some version of a narcissistic sociopath. You know, they don't think like you and me. They aren't like you and me. Most of us would never go into politics because it would require you to sacrifice your soul in order to do so. But these power structures attract people who want power, and they are quite comfortable with cracking as many eggs as necessary in order to get to power. So again, why people can't understand this, I don't understand, but it's the fear campaigns and the propaganda. And then, I mean, to come full circle, he has been covering up for and protecting the Tate brothers, and so has conservative media. And so that was really the final nail in the coffin for me. I'm like, this guy in real time has sent a diplomatic special envoy to the president, Richard Grenell, to Munich to strong arm Romanian officials on behalf of the Tate brothers so that they could hop on a private jet, fly back to the United States of America, be met on the tarmac by none other than Roger Stone, who reportedly had cigars for them at the time, and then move in. I mean, I think they spent 2 weeks in Florida, and then Ron DeSantis had his way with them and chased them out, which was glorious to watch. But so President Trump is notorious for protecting pimps and pedophiles and rapists and criminals. And so I don't know what to tell people. I mean, there's so much there. It takes a special amount of gaslighting for people to just ignore the facts. But again, the partisan nature of politics today really inhibits people from seeing it, which is a shame.
Yeah, they just blatantly ignore facts on both sides of the paradigm, you know. But the Tate thing is so interesting because, I mean, I could point to many people. I think, what is it, Murder by Crayons or Milk Bar TV?
So
you know, and Milk Bar TV as well. They've been breaking this stuff down for, I mean, since the moment it was really a major focal point. And just, I mean, this is what's so wild to me, and this is what we're kind of addressing in a larger sense. Is, you know, these aren't like manipulative videos. They're simply a compilation of what they themselves are claiming they've done, evidence of showing what they have done. You know, like it's provable, undeniable documentation of, like, you know, or literal things that they say on Tucker, on Candace Owens, that they just literally didn't do. Or that's the crazy part to me, is not only, you know, the Trump aspect, but how you get these commentators who just give them a platform, who are supposed to be journalists, that are just lying about what they're saying. Now,
who are supposed to be Christian conservatives.
Right.
These are Christ is king. Like, even if you erased all of the charges, which are horrifying, of the Tate brothers, even if you erase the charges, they are self-admitted pimps and pornographers.
Right. And good.
Right. I mean, so that Candace Owens will scream Christ is king at people. I don't know, anytime she's backed in a corner, yet multiple times throughout the past 18 to 24 months, she has lied for the Tate brothers. She has platformed the Tate brothers. She has deceived her audience about the nature of the crimes, the severity of the crimes, and she has done that as recently as just a couple months ago. Wrap your mind around that.
It's confusing to me, because there's, I mean, I obviously she's very partisan, but there's plenty of stuff that she's doing in plenty of categories that I think is pretty solid. So it's just going like, what is the point? Why would you do that? Why would you knowingly, like, she's not stupid. She knows that there's video evidence of exactly what they're claiming they're not doing. Why? You know, that's the same point. Is I'm not going to assume, I'm not going to guess. It could be any number of the things we discussed around RFK. You know, there's plenty of movable factors that could make people act against their interest. We could even go in a crazy direction, as Catherine Austin Fitts would discuss, around like neuro weapons and things that get you to like literally act against your own intentions. I don't know, but it's just so frustrating, because you're right. It is very clear. And it's interesting you bring it up in this context, because, you know, like, we could point back to someone like Charlie Manson and all the evidence to suggest he was just an Epstein of his time, you know, or maybe this
I never
aspect.
knew about that. Interesting.
Oh yeah, it's a whole thing, it's a whole rabbit hole. It's worth looking into, like the overlap of the Hollywood scene, even the whole story we know about with
Sharon Tate.
Sharon Tate, interestingly enough. I was making sure I'm making a mistake
Oh
there.
yeah, right. The Tate.
Yeah.
Any connection? I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know actually, but the whole story is interesting, and there's a lot of overlapping alignment there. And I think that's what it was. I think he was just, he had this harem of girls. He was connected to these, it's a whole story. But wondering whether or not the Tate aspect is just another part of that today, it's hard to say. It's worth looking into. But the point is about the cover up from the highest levels of power and what that really shows you about the power, and it's nonpartisan. It goes both ways. It's so interesting. But back to the Elon point that you brought up about Epstein, because the back on the tweet, it's either way, it shows you what a lot of us have been trying to point out, right? That they're just being dishonest with you. So if your point is that Elon, whoever out there, Candace is the point she's making there. If your point is that Elon is lying about this because he's mad at Trump, well, then they're being childish and petty, and that's what they are. Or if your point is they're finally telling you the truth and they've been lying to you the whole time for their political agenda. No matter which way you look at it, it shows you the kind of thing that we're highlighting is they will lie to you about anything to achieve their ends, left and right. I think that's important.
Absolutely. And didn't Elon Musk's brother Elon was involved with the Tates through one of his close relatives as well. So Elon has a history with the Tates, I believe.
Yeah.
No, maybe it was maybe it was I can't remember. I'm not going to say it because I can't remember.
Yeah,
but
no, I don't know the interconnection between Elon and the rest, but my point is that there are the levels of power connected to those people is just, it doesn't make much sense. I mean, they're wealthy, but I
called it out as fake. I mean, the two dads fighting, everyone's head exploded. I mean, Con Inc. and Bizarro Con did not know what to do with themselves for multiple days because you have two idols, right? Two political idols right here. And so I'm not surprised. There had to have been some kind of agenda for that. I don't know what it was, but it was very bizarre, very weird. And Elon's weird too, like with the bobbing and weaving. Yeah. It's just all so weird.
Somebody threw out a really interesting possibility just for the sake of conversation, because it's not that far-fetched with what's going on in the world. But, people are saying, oh, he's on drugs, which is probably the most like Occam's razor. It's the simplest, that he's just taking ketamine, right? But somebody was like, weird images of him like looking up and with his eyes. It's really weird, right? And they said, what if he already has Neuralink? And he's literally like going through Grok and like every, mass considering possibility. It's like, I don't think that's not what I would assume, but that's.
Nothing would surprise me. This is my other rule about conspiracy theories, right? There are lots of them out there, and like some of them are wild, and I try not to go down the rabbit hole too often because you'll stick your head in the oven after, right? But nothing would surprise me.
Yeah.
There is nothing, there is no level of depravity or weirdness or evil that would surprise me at this point with these leaders.
Yeah. I think the point is like my general point saying question everything, but the extra part of it is while considering all possibilities, like you're saying, nothing is outside these things. Like what we just said there is in a very small step away from being exactly what would make sense, and even right now, the idea that he might've already done it, it's like, and I'm not even saying that's what I think. It's just an interesting time to consider how that wild statement is like, that it's all very possible. They're doing all this right now, so just don't
say they can do it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, they're all excited about it. They want us to, they want to nanobot us and interface us with computers and read our minds. Yuval Harari. I mean, screw you. I don't want that. But they're all very excited about this, and they're telling us that they can do it, and they're telling us they're going to cure cancer and pinpoint pandemics before they even start. Well, how would you do that? Well, it's by biological data collection,
surveillance, real time. That's how I see it.
These things. I mean, that's terrifying too. That keeps me up at night a little bit.
Yeah. That's my big thing. The nanotech overlap, like the thing that scares me, like the idea of how do you even fight something like that? And that's, and I've done long deep dives on that. I
believe in Jesus.
So, well, I mean, it's that's where it kind of takes you. It's just like, this is like, so it might as well be some, it's just so outside of the realm of possibility and like the way we see the world, but it's definitely coming in this direction. But so what's interesting is let's talk about that and where it goes, AI Palunteer. But before that, let's talk about what seems to be, and even what we were just kind of highlighting about like the fight one of the many things that people consider of why. What are they trying to pull your attention away from? Well, the Palunteer thing is almost embarrassingly obvious. And you get the Joneses of the world, and these people like doing this like tap dance, like, look over here, or like Palunteer is a small company and it's left that are pushing it. It's like, wow, like it shows you how desperate it is to try to not, people they don't want people looking at this from like a, the hierarchy enslaving you, like the power structure, in my opinion, because it's a nonpartisan agenda to roll all this out. But my point would be that there's a lot of reasons they're trying to drive us there or distract us from it. So let's talk about the LA overlap, which already is being pushed to use Palunteer, or they already are, in fact, for surveillance, for immigrants. So it all kind of comes together. But I feel like we should address this topic today because it's such an interesting kind of inflection point that's being used, and there's a lot of different agendas that cross through it. Mm-hmm. So I thought we could start with this clip that I do think was pretty interesting. This is Sam Tripoli on Joe Rogan in 2023, basically laying out the process, basically moving away from the woke ideology, rolling into immigration, and then having the riots and stuff take place today. Now, it's not that hard to see that coming. I mean, I feel like myself, I made a similar point about, the woke, as I've said even recently with USAID, it's just, I don't believe that any of these people are, from the highest levels of power are really caring about whether you use pronouns. It's about an agenda. Some people absorbed it, but really it's a shoe in the door for the regime change kind of a thing. That's how I see the larger point anyway.
Or compliance test, or what are you willing to go along with? I think that they love to get us to go along with the most absurd things. Because that's evidence of complete submission. When we turn our brains off and we say, yes, 2 + 2 does equal 5. That's when they're like, okay, we got them. They're ready to be suppressed completely.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's very clear that, there's any number of different things that these things can achieve. And, also one of them, just getting people to check out because it's just too much. And so that's the best case scenario. Eat their McDonald's, go to Walmart, just sit back and not care about what's going on. That's what they want. But so this clip is interesting. So somebody did a juxtaposition of the two things. Sam shared it of just him saying this. And this one I think is better because it shows the 2025 and happening. And so this is him in 2023 again, laying this out. Basically, Mel K, who we discussed, Mel K, right? She's wanted. She does good work. And so her talking to him about this, and I just think the timing is interesting.
We're in the Bolshevik war right now, bro. And right now what's coming up is all the pride stuff is going to be, okay, so I had this woman come on my podcast. Her name's Mel K. She goes, I've been talking to some people in the intelligence, and they go, this gay pride stuff is going away. And the next thing you're going to see are immigration riots. This is going to be right around the next election. So hand to God, we do this episode. Next day, Starbucks is like, we're banning all the pride stuff. And now you start seeing they're putting little breadcrumbs out, man. Little breadcrumbs. Oh, I saw this one thing in Chicago. Oh, yeah, illegal immigrants are upset about where they're staying. And these illegal immigrants who speak no English are holding up perfectly written English signs saying we're tired of how we're being treated. And now you're starting to see this over and over again. So everyone's always like, when all these Republican governors are like sending these immigrants all over the country, everyone's like, yeah, you're showing those Democrats. Bro, they're moving assets. I know it sounds crazy, but that is 100%
What do you mean they're moving assets? What do you mean?
Dude, these guys coming into the country, bro, have you seen them? A lot of them are Chinese, and a lot of them are military-age people. Too. And I'm telling you, they're moving, and this is what's going to be right around 2024 election. Immigration riots, people going nuts, and as listen to this, and you'll start seeing all the little breadcrumbs. I'm telling you, that's what they want you to think.
You're buying it.
Oh, I thought they're moving assets, bro.
You're the puppet.
They're moving assets.
What do you mean, like military people?
Dude, study the Bolshevik War. It is happening in real time. 100%.
But
I just wanted to get that out to everybody because I'm trying to warn people. This is what's next.
Yeah.
We're in the
this guy right here. I forget his name now. He's an actor. He's always the naysayer. He's always like, I don't know about that. Like this guy.
But I swear they play roles. They do. They have roles. They play them. Yeah.
Before we get into all of it, what's interesting to me is, so basically, I don't necessarily agree with everything he laid out there. Like, I think what's clear, like to clarify, like the idea of like the military aid and Chinese, like all of that is real to some degree. Like that, but I don't know whether it is the point that like I think it's a nonpartisan effort to drive us in this direction. And so I think it behooves us to not fall into like the partisan angles of it that get you thinking the Democrats are doing this to the Republicans. Because, and let's talk about this. I don't want to lurch into all my opinions first, but it's very interesting to see that the narratives just don't make any sense right now about why they would be doing this. But what is interesting is the very clear timing of moving away from the woke direction, and not in everywhere, but in like the mainstream push, and then having this come to pass. And it does very clearly work for where this agenda is going. Like one step, 1, 2, 3, kind of through Biden into Trump, or the Trump into Biden, back to Trump, and so give me your thoughts on that. And then what's going on in LA and everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, my knee jerk is clearly staged.
Oh yeah.
Clearly. And, for me, it was very reminiscent, to be honest, of the J6 rallies in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Protest what they believed was a stolen election. So you take a group of people who are good, normal, pretty much law-abiding American citizens, and you rile them up about something, and you press the emotional buttons and the fear buttons, and they all congregate in Washington, D.C. Palunteer is there, scooping up all their facial recognition data. You place a couple very strategically placed agent provocateurs, people like Q the shaman, if you remember, the guy with the weird head and the whatever, ushering everyone into the Capitol. You had the Ray Epps character that was riling everyone up. And so you can really move, you can herd a crowd into a dangerous situation and a potentially violent situation by just using a few strategically placed change agents or intelligence agents.
Absolutely.
And when you look at what is happening in LA, the imagery, the picture of the flag, it's just all too perfect. To me, it seems like a theater production. And so, the good, and that is the front facing, that's the narrative. The narrative is to do what? Well, to build a control grid, right? To justify, you combine violence in cities across America, or perceived violence in cities across America, with a potential bioterror attack that they have been talking about and also simulating in the past couple of months. On July 4th, for example, which is the date of the attack that they talk about, that 2025, with an economic meltdown or crisis. And you put all of those things together, you have a tinderbox, and then this is the perfect opportunity for them to solve a lot of problems for government, right? The biggest being the 30-some $1 trillion debt and deficit, and the fact that the currency is about to collapse and they're going to run out of money. Right. So they're in this process. All of this, I think everything always comes back to money. It's the economy stupid, is what Bill Clinton said. And I think a lot of times these distraction campaigns are designed to solidify their power and their control base, which will solidify the money or whatever transition we're making into a new global currency or a digital control grid. But also then give the rationale for full-scale military suppression or a military police state. Now, I say that's like kind of the worst case scenario. I had nightmares about a military police state during the lockdowns of COVID-19. I think all of us were like, where is this going to go? Are they going to roll tanks down the street, rip us from our homes, put us in a gurney, and shove a needle in our arm? Is that where this is going to go? What I learned through COVID is that actually achieving this agenda is quite difficult, right? 365 million Americans, all in various, locations of the country. It's very difficult for them to, and even with the most sophisticated propaganda operation I ever saw, and that was during COVID, right? They were not able to fully lock us down. They wanted vaccine mandates so badly for every American, and they tried, but they weren't able to actually achieve that.
They always need some level of compliance from the population.
You're always going to receive some level of compliance, but if there is a loud enough minority and a well-connected enough minority, we have the ability to very easily put them down, right? They can try these things. And what I love about the recent psyops, the crazier they get, the more people are like, this is like a freaking cartoon.
Right.
Like, this is ridiculous. This this is like the Road Runner and the Tasmanian devil wrestling off a cliff. Like, that's the way I look at the Democrats and Republicans and Elon and Trump. Like, it's almost, and not to say that violence in LA is laughable. It's not.
Yeah, there's definitely violence. There's also real people protesting. You know, it all
right.
happens.
and quite frankly, a lot of those real people are probably nice people who just care about immigrants. I mean, like,
or more so care about the fact that ICE is verifiably breaking the law. And that's not to say that immigrants that are illegally here shouldn't be deported. Like, these things can exist in the same conversation. This is crazy.
Right. Like, we could solve so many problems in this country actually quite easily. And I mentioned this on my show yesterday. They're like, oh, well, what would you do, Shannon? All the crime. And listen, I appeal, interestingly enough, to a more, I guess, Christian conservative kind of audience. And, you know, we have been propagandized with the scary illegals and the gang cartels. And it is relentless. And those are big problems, right? Yep. It's not okay that we are importing terror cells, terrorists, terror groups, you know, cartels. That's not okay at all. But, you know, people are like, well, what would you do, Shannon? Like, you're gonna have crime in your neighborhood. I hope the terrorist comes to your house. I'll get that sometimes.
Right.
And I'm like, you know what? It's actually quite simple. Like, you turn off the money. You give them 30 days and you say, hey, you know what? We'll pay your plane ticket home. And that's it. Most people would self-deport. Because the reality is that most immigrants stay here because they get free school, free health, free rent, all of the benefits from the federal and state governments through organizations like Catholic Charities and non-governmental organizations and all of these orgs tethered to the government. And so if you just cut the money off, that would also have the added benefit of, you know, slashing our budget in the federal government, right? If we're really concerned with, you know, curbing spending. I mean, so all of these things could be done. They aren't being done because once again, they have succeeded in dividing this country so that we can't have conversations where a Democrat or a liberal would say, well, I'm worried about immigrants. And you could say, okay, well, we got to figure out something here because I'm sure you also have a fence around your house, a door to your house and curtains on your window. And I'm sure you wouldn't want some illegal coming in and camping out on your couch and getting in your fridge and taking your stuff. Like, there's got to be some kind of private property here, you know, where we don't just let them pour in and come on, that's insane.
It comes back to the manufactured nature of this, where what you're alluding to there is that both sides are benefiting from the ongoing problem. And so it's like there's narratives about what needs to happen, vice versa. Like that very clear moment in I think it was Biden's administration, or was it? Yeah, it was, and where the Texas border became that big focal point, right? With those things in the water, with the razor blades, whatever weirdness that was, which is crazy. But then prominent conservative report were like, okay, here's this border with the they're all up at the gate and it's locked and they drove down to the next stop and the gate was swinging open in the wind. And you're going like, so they can't just walk down. Like, we're being played, guys. That's not to say it's not illegal immigration, but they're creating these buzz stories that you know, to manipulate people, you know? And so the crazy thing is, clearly there's a lot of factors involved with the immigration point. Like, I think obviously the main point is if someone is here illegally, that's breaking the law. They should be dealt with. That's the bottom line is there's already laws to deal with this stuff. That's why we have to manufacture all these narratives to be like, oh, it's because they did this, therefore we can't do it that way. There's never an argument for me that I'll agree with that's we can't follow we can't. Here's why the Constitution doesn't apply right now. The Republicans made the same point during COVID and said there's no asterisk that says except when there's a pathogen. It's the same point. You've got to follow what's real. But the point is that clearly there's other factors like U.S. foreign policy that's literally using your tax dollars to destroy entire civilizations that then people flee and then seek for some. And what's crazy to me is you got the Republican side of this, or both sides really, still spitting this lie that it's like they're only coming here for a better life and they want to be here because freedom and democracy. And then when they actually try to do that in many cases, there are people right now in this country that are going through that process legally.
Right.
A citizenship through legal channels, but yes, there's also criminals, but it's just a crazy dynamic where it's being, they want one side to think that it is about only criminals. They want the other side to think that they're only arresting innocent people, whether illegal or not, should be here. Most people in the middle who are nonpartisan are aware of the fact, I shouldn't say they're all nonpartisan, but aware of the fact that there's nuance to it. That they're, and the point being that the government is using both those narratives to achieve a lot of different ends. And at least that's how I see it.
Yeah. Well, and I remember, I advocated for my audience remember the summer of rage in 2020 when like we were all locked down, but they could go and burn cities and like protest for BLM. Remember all of that? So, and I remember just being like the fear was really setting in, and we were thinking like this is going to spread and it's going to come, to every city in America, and I was very concerned with what they were going to do in order to quell that. And I looked out my window and I said to my audience at one point, I'm like, listen, like 99% of the United States of America is peaceful and quiet. And people go to bed at night and they tuck their kids in and they are safe. Things are okay. These are moments. These are highly publicized moments in cities that are designed to make you think that the government needs to take some type of extraordinary action in order to take care of it. No, these are highly isolated, and we just need to like keep calm, carry on, and cling to our Constitution. And don't let the bastards get away with using our fear.
100%. And I'll say too that even if it was the extreme situation that you think they're framing it as, the answer is still not to violate the Constitution.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
what's so insane is the only guideline we have. And I would even argue that, clearly the government for a long time, both sides of it, does not care about the Constitution, but they know that we do. And so they have to constantly give lip service to pretending to care about it. And that illusion is being flirted with right now to being removed, right? Like right now. But what's crazy is they are bound by it to some degree, even if it's just because they need us to think that. So that's like the last tendril of hope we have in a state of society. Different conversation, if that's what we want to live in. My mind is we could live in a world without government, but since we're stuck here, the Constitution is important, So it's so these are the conversations we need to have about this stuff, because there's people out there that are interested, that would otherwise be interested in hearing a nuanced argument, but they just don't know where to find it right now because they're, algorithmically jammed into the partisan,
totally
commentators out there.
Yeah. I think there's a total bottleneck there for sure.
Absolutely. So I wanted to go to a couple of the points I thought were interesting. And this is, so basically we've seen, so the development of this is being, like, we both seem to agree that this is being used to, whether or not it's exactly the way it looks to you, or that the reality is that it is still being used to achieve these ends. And so the point we're making is that the reality of them, like, for example, deploying the military, which I don't know if the National Guard, the military, at this point, as far as I can tell, it is a direct and provable violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. And that's not just because they're deployed, but now what I found really interesting is where I had pulled up right here. Where was that? I'm just jumping ahead a little bit. Okay, here we are. So this is interesting because the Air Mellick's a lawyer. He basically just came out and this is directly citing from this is from ICE posting this. So ICE confirms they are using California National Guard troops deputized over the objection of Gavin Newsom, which I think is he's a monster, to support ICE operations. And so my point is simple. So they are enforcing the law, as well as we all already knew, just some pretending otherwise. Therefore, based on the Posse Comitatus Act, because interestingly enough, they were deployed under federal authority because Gavin didn't want to, which is a whole states' rights discussion, but Trump does it anyway. And so the point is, this is a textbook example of a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. And this is not debatable, guys. This is all very, very clear, but yet it'll still be ignored. And so you can touch on that if you'd like. My point is the broader idea that there's a lot that's being done through this that is unconstitutional, that is illegal. And the only argument you're getting is that it's about a Mexican invasion, which interestingly then gives them the excuse to argue it is an insurrection or a rebellion, which then rationalizes why this wouldn't matter anymore. And I'll touch on that next. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that there are probably multiple rationales for this being a violation of the Constitution or an overreach of executive authority by the president. And gosh, I wish that we could have those kind of conversations in the country. I think even outside of the Constitution, I think it's a terrifying expansion of power. Oh, yeah. And I think that coupled with the military parade, the movement of all the tanks and all of it's just frightening. I think it frightens people, and it should frighten people. And I hope that it frightens people. And, yeah, I mean, in some ways, listen, the Constitution is the law of the land. It is our governing document, right? We are absolutely engaging, at least politically, in a post-constitutional moment. Okay. There is no way either political party or this president or Elon Musk, the co-president, our co-dad in government, okay, are operating within the boundaries of the Constitution. The coup de Doge, which I covered on my show extensively, involved Elon Musk walking in with technologists and basically siphoning off and sucking up trillions of dollars potentially in the most valuable data on the face of the planet and doing whatever they want with it. Okay, so handing it to Peter Thiel over at Palunteer. I mean, we are looking at so many aspects of a rogue cartel government. And this is why I really appreciate the work of Catherine Austin Fitts and Whitney Webb. I think that Catherine nails it. I think we are dealing with criminal enterprises here, a criminal cartel. I think that Biden is part of the criminal cartel. I think that Trump is part of the cartel. I think most of the front-facing people that we see are actors in a sense. They don't really wield the power, but they do play a role. I think they know what their role is. I would even say that Elon Musk, and Catherine would call him an operation, not a man, right? You don't run 7 massive corporations, tweet all day and play video games all day while having junkets in the Oval Office and with Trump's cabinet if you don't have a team of people pushing that messaging out. Right. So there's a point to the Elon, there's a point to the Trump, and it's criminal in nature. So grappling with that as an American is difficult, but the answer though is, and you mentioned something earlier, we should probably wrap it up pretty soon because I don't want to, I think I'm coming up with against a meeting. But
absolutely.
You mentioned, the thing that they don't want to do is to have people like tune out or not, not play ball or be involved. There is a part of that though that I think is incredibly powerful if we just turned off the Washington DC show and we retreated back into federalism or localism. Even more important than federalism would be localism, right? The municipality, local governments, your town, your village, your family, your community, your civics organizations, right? And basically just said to Washington, DC, I mean, you have no jurisdiction here. So you can play your little games and you can try to, roll in your military, like try to suppress the United States of America with your military. Like, I mean, you can't do it. There's no way. There's just absolutely no way. And then when you begin to see the actions of governors like Ron DeSantis making gold and silver legal tender and beginning the process of establishing a state sovereign bank. And then, starting the process of real estate reform, tax reform, where you don't pay taxes on real estate anymore, because that's also a violation of constitutional principles. And then you see that other governors, like Governor Abbott in Texas, is mimicking this. And you begin to see the states emancipate from the government. And the more we emancipate from the federal government, and the money part is really important, because when you are able to have a sovereign bank, which is also constitutional, right? And I think North Dakota has had a sovereign bank since 2000 or since 1919 or 1909 or something, whatever, like 100 years. Then you realize that the only tether that the federal government has on us is through the money, the bennies. It's all the money, the largest coming. So we send all of our money to Washington, D.C. They launder it, they steal it, they hand it out to their people, right? They use it to enrich their partners, and then they give us like some crumbs back to the states. That's what we got, right? When we realize that we don't have to go through that money laundering process, like they don't have anything if we don't send it to them. And then you have people operating at the state level in self-preservation, because at the end of the day, I think people still want to survive. we want to, I don't know, like fall in love and get married and have children and pursue happiness and build a house, plant a garden, have none of that will ever change. That's That's the human experience. That's 5,000 years of human history. That's never going to change. There's always going to be an economy. There are always going to be relationships. The question is, are we going to turn off their ridiculous show?
Right.
Start getting to the work of building up, our own infrastructure from the bottom up. That's the exciting part of all that, of all of this. And the other part too is, I think it is they like to project strength, their technology, their tanks and their guns, and right. They want us disillusioned. They want us depressed, apathetic, terrified, and they do that through that projection of strength. I don't think they're nearly as strong as we think they are.
I agree.
And I don't think they know what to do if we really, enough of us, not even a majority, just a loud minority, stand up and say, you know what, we're just not buying this anymore. You're done.
I agree. I really do. I mean, I think that's such a, the problem is so many people would dismiss that as just impossible, not, without even giving it the real thought that it deserves, and understand that in any circumstance, like taking a local point with police and engaging with a crowd, they have a number in their mind. Maybe not the individual people, but the people who are in charge, they know we can't take more than this number. And this is a very important point to think about. And if we notice that's happening, we strategically pull back. And that's why you see those moves where they just let things continue to happen. The government knows that. Whether it's continuity of government, large term play, they know if this many people in this country resist, we can't functionally do anything other than just come at them with full force, which that would be, that's arguably that's not in their interest either.
We saw it with COVID.
Right.
We saw it with COVID. The only country in the world that we probably had 35, maybe even 45%, or now 40 of this country refuse the COVID vaccine to great detriment, right? Yeah. That's like extraordinary. And they were not that was a major problem for them.
I agree.
And it will continue to be a major problem for them. So we can see it working in real time. We just have to expand on it.
100%.
Keep the movement together.
Yes. Well, since you have to go soon, I was going to just play one more clip.
Sure.
And you have time for that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think so. 2 points to end with, I think, are interesting. And then we should definitely connect again. I think there's plenty more we could get into. There's plenty, never an end of stuff to talk about. I agree.
Right.
I agree.
Oh, I have to have you on my show. So
absolutely.
Now you have to we got to do the reciprocal, and then you come on my show, because this is a
count on it. I'm looking forward to it.
I knew I was going to like you.
Well, it's weird. We start the show out and we're like already on the same page with where we're going with the stuff. There's something there. But so this, I tweeted this today, and this was just another article in Texas. You mentioned Governor Abbott is already saying he's going to deploy the National Guard because there's a protest that's scheduled. And I'm like, okay, this is not new, really. We've seen this kind of thing happen before, but I just want to point out, deploying military before a planned protest, not due to violence, but simply to claim that it could happen. This is my opinion anyway. We're being destroyed by fake America First Zionists. I think that's a really large part of this. And so I want to play this clip of Trump. You mentioned the military parade. Here's what Trump just said. Very short clip. You probably saw it. I think this is alarming that this is where we are. Not if they do this, but just a stated fact if they protest.
Yeah.
Big on Saturday. We're going to have a lot of, and if there's any protester wants to come out, they will be met with very big force.
Okay, that's not okay.
Want to protest?
He said it 3 times.
Met with very big force, and I haven't even heard about a protest. But this is people that hate our country.
Let's go, Ryan. Let's go protest.
Force.
He says it 3 times in a row. Yeah. And I'm just like, okay, there's no nuance there. Like, he's saying if they protest, they'll be met with force. And so everyone that might protest automatically hates the country. Like, guys, these are like inherently anti-American sentiments that he's pushing out. It's just so important that we acknowledge these things. And back to the larger point about what's happening with all this. And as both of us discuss how it's being used. Go ahead.
No, we have to resist that. And we might have to go protest. I mean, we might have to go and stand up and peacefully, regardless of our opinions about immigration or ICE or any of those things, because what Governor Abbott said is horrifying. It is blatantly unconstitutional. We have the right to speech, right? So we have the right to free speech. That means assembly. We have the right to assemble, period. And if we want to go and protest President Trump's little military parade, then we should be able to do so. And in fact, I think we are probably compelled to do so. That's outrageous.
It is.
That's outrageous.
And it's just alarming how many people will know that and agree with us, but fail to call it out because of who's saying it. And that's what one of the driving points today is, it's about principles. It's about what you believe is right. And, you know as well as I out there listening that what you're seeing in many ways is making you uncomfortable. And obviously, if it was Biden, you'd already be yelling about it. And
Well,
if
they'd lose their minds. They would lose their Alex Jones. His face would be so red, and his veins would be popping out of his neck. Bongino too. Like they would go absolutely batshit crazy.
Right. Well, I mean,
crazy.
Since you point that out, just to end, I think this is one of the things that let me show this since I mentioned it as well. Catherine shared this, simply highlighting that these protests are being funded by groups. I just warn us to think that it's a left-right paradigm thing, whether it's left groups or not. I think what's happening what I was going to say is how you explain to me that what the argument from the right is the left wants immigrants to be here, yet they manufacture chaos that drives the outcome of not letting immigrants be here. Like these things don't make sense to me, but they are being orchestrated. We both agree on that. I just think it's important that we remember that it's, a two-party illusion dynamic. But I'll show you this video before we leave. And I wanted to highlight things like this. Alex saying the Democrat finance controlled insurrection is now spreading nationwide.
Oh my gosh.
And insurrection being used, in my opinion, because that's what gives the government the justification to not have to worry about posse comitatus. And then this one about Mexico. You got to go. So I'll play this one on the way out, just so I think this is important. As James says, seeing is no longer believing. Head on a swivel, y'all. Things are about to get wild. And I can play this on the way out, or would you like me to play it now?
No, I can give you a couple. I've got a couple more minutes. I mean,
that's okay. This will be the last one. And it's let's see. Oh, did I forget to grab it? Here, let's see. It's what it is basically is it's a video of just somebody showing the capabilities. Not to say that she necessarily, this is what's happening at these places, but simply showing that the capabilities of these platforms today to basically, do not necessarily deep fakes, but I guess that is what it would be called, a false video of what you're seeing. And so this is just something to keep in mind with all that's going on, and now you're being driven to hate a certain side. Here is a video that I think is compelling that James Lee shared.
Okay.
I live in LA, so I decided to go downtown today and talk to people and find out what's really going on, what's their side of the story, to only get attacked and realize that they're all full of shit. Okay? Can't believe any of them. They're all full of shit.
Did you catch that? It's a what do they call it? A filter you put over on TikTok or whatever else that makes it look like you're beat up. It's
oh no way.
Yeah, and these are everywhere. People are using this now. My point is you'll always get people just to watch the world burn that want to come out and just throw something in that makes people upset. But there's also very clear intelligence and political agendas. I just think that's important to consider.
Every discernment, wisdom, sobriety, I think is going to be critical moving forward, because there is just so much deception out there. That is wild. And I'll tell you, Alex Jones is an utter tragedy, a tragedy. I don't know how anyone can take him serious. He's clearly a propagandist. In every sense of the word.
I agree.
At the very least.
No, I agree completely. I just think that it's agreeing with you. There's 100 examples over the process of a week that show you dishonest tactics or just flat out incorrect information. And it's not about hating somebody. It's about showing people that you're being deceived, and whether he knows it or not, which I find almost impossible if he doesn't. There's a lot of people like that out there. So the message is just question everything, right? You don't fall into these ideological bubbles because they're using you, Right.
Yeah. And, we can we probably give a million examples of Democrats doing this too. But
exactly.
For me, it's the people in power. See, I follow the powerful. And so when the Democrats are in power, I'm going to scrutinize them. When the Republicans are in power, I'm going to scrutinize them. We're in dangerous times. And so I'm glad that you and I made this connection. I so appreciate your work. I really, if there's a wavelength, we're both on it for sure. It's very rare that you meet someone you're like, but I really appreciate you having me on. And I just cannot wait to introduce you to my audience as well, because this has been a long time coming, I think. And so here's to hopefully a lot of future years in collaboration. We have a lot of work to do for sure.
Yes, here. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm sure, I think that there's, like we were saying earlier, that, there's an effort out there to stop certain people from collaborating, in my opinion. Call me a conspiracy theorist, plenty do. I think it's interesting that there's a reason, you can see why. When people, especially with audiences, and you overlap that, like you gain momentum with these things. And I think the system, more than ever, that we saw right before the selection of 2024 and 2025, that people were just, we're going, question the two-party illusion. Maybe don't vote for don't vote or vote somebody. And people lost their minds when we've been saying that for years. The system is desperate. It is vulnerable right now. And I don't mean to collapse the country sense. I mean the sense of the power structures trying to control you. And it's a time right now, as you say, for real change. And I think that we do have, let's put it this way, we do have a lot of work to do. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Yeah. And as always, everybody out there, thank you for joining. Question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.